All right, so give it to me. How are Republicans responsible?
Because they could end this right now. They are choosing to make this issue of the shutdown an issue where they pit the sick against the hungry. The reality is this is a false choice. We don't need to be here. Prior to this moment, we've been able to afford both the ACA subsidies and SNAP benefits for 42 million Americans. So you have to ask yourself, why are we here? And the reality is that the Republicans passed their one big beautiful bill. They cut $1 trillion from healthcare. That included 17 million people worth of Medicaid benefits.
In today's video, Tyler Cohen takes apart Chris Cuomo on News Nation as a calm conversation. About the government shutdown quickly erupts into a heated clash when Brian calls out Cuomo for using a double standard on accountability and fiscal responsibility while millions of Americans deal with the real fallout of the shutdown, from losing SNAP assistance to seeing child care support frozen. And Brian highlights how conservative talking points often overlook the human cost behind these political games, while Cuomo tries to push back but can't escape the fact that the numbers and reality simply aren't backing him this time. So let's jump in and see how Tyler Cohen ends up shutting Chris Cuomo down on News Nation.
All right, so give it to me. How are Republicans responsible?
Because they could end this right now. They are choosing to make this issue of the shutdown an issue where they pit the sick against the hungry. The reality is this is a false choice. We don't need to be here. Prior to this moment, we've been able to afford both the ACA subsidies and SNAP benefits for 42 million Americans. So you have to ask yourself, why are we here? And the reality is that the Republicans passed their one big beautiful bill. They cut $1 trillion from healthcare. That included 17 million people worth of Medicaid benefits, and they also cut $350 billion worth of SNAP benefits. So if you're wondering how we got here, it's because we're dealing with a Republican Party that has full control of government, House, Senate, White House, and their priority is not to continue these programs. It is expressly to cut them. That's why they did it. Don't listen to what they say. Just watch what they do.
Okay. I will talk to you about the policies, and I don't disagree with the needs and what should be priorities, but that's why you have elections. And Trump won, and the debt and the deficit were huge problems, and health care is something that is seen as having a lot of fat to it. Do I agree? No. But that is why they picked these things. Now, you leave something out. We are where we are because of your party. The Senate won't give the votes on the Democratic side to get past the filibuster for reconciliation. That is why the government shut down. It is not a question. That is a fact.
Nor should they. And you want to talk about what the American people voted for? It was Trump and Republicans who said that they were going to protect earned benefits, not completely gut them like they've done right now. 78% of Americans. Wait, let me finish. 78% of Americans, and I know that you've showed this stat on your show, the Kaiser Family Foundation.
This is true.
78% of Americans agree that Congress should extend these ACA subsidies. So if you want to talk about a mandate for the American people, this is it.
Yes.
You know, you had just mentioned a moment ago, too, that there was some mandate to cut spending. The Republicans blew a $4 trillion hole in the deficit because they wanted to give a tax cut to millionaires and billionaires. So on this issue, they're not even abiding by the thing that they promised on the campaign trail. There's no deficit spending getting under control right here. They blew the deficit up.
Look, listen, again, here's the debatable point. They say no. The tax cuts drove the economy. The first administration was much better than Biden's economy. Of course, he had the pandemic, but that's how the cookie crumbles. You got to deal with what happens on your watch, and that's why they want the tax cuts. I don't agree. But here is your problem, Tyler Cohen. You are fighting the right fight, in my opinion. This is righteous. The subsidies are needed, and they wouldn't even be needed as much if so many red states didn't play politics and refused to expand Medicaid when they had the chance. And I have two ideas. The first one is right fight, wrong way, wrong battleground. Shutting down the government, and Schumer is a terrible messenger for you guys because everybody knows he did it. He doesn't want to make a deal right now because he thinks this pain is working for him. But this was the wrong way to have the right fight. And you can say this is the only leverage we had. I don't agree. You got to find a better way to have the debate.
It is the only leverage we have.
What's really striking in this exchange between Tyler Cohen and Chris Cuomo is how it exposes the deeper conflict between political talk and actual economic reality. Because while Chris tries to paint the government shutdown and spending cuts as unavoidable steps toward fiscal responsibility, That argument falls apart as soon as you look at the facts. And Brian is absolutely right to call out the contradiction of demanding deficit control while supporting trillion-dollar tax cuts for the wealthy, especially when the Congressional Budget Office confirmed that Trump's 2017 tax plan added nearly $1.9 trillion to the national debt and sent most of its benefits to corporations and high earners rather than the middle class. And if this debate were truly about responsible budgeting, we'd see the same level of outrage directed at corporate loopholes instead of constant pressure to cut health care or food assistance. And the reality becomes even clearer when you look at the SNAP and Medicaid cuts. Since the Department of Agriculture projected that the SNAP rollbacks would hit more than 40 million Americans, including seniors, veterans, and working families, turning it from a budget conversation into one about basic survival. While states that refuse to expand Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act have left millions without insurance, triggered hospital closures in rural communities, and shifted costs right back onto taxpayers. So when Cuomo argues that Democrats chose the wrong battlefield, he misses the heart of the issue because sometimes the only way to stop a damaging policy is to take a stand even if it comes with political risk. Since fiscal conservatism without compassion isn't leadership, it's neglect disguised as discipline.
The reality is that Democrats are in the minority in the House.
You'll never get what you want. You'll never get it. Nobody has ever ended a shutdown getting what they want. It doesn't happen because all we would have is shutdowns.
This is the only instance where the Democrats could put forward any leverage whatsoever. The vast majority of the American people are behind them. Like I said, 8 in 10 Americans agree that Congress should extend these ACA subsidies. And the reality is the Democrats are trying to save Republicans from themselves. You had just mentioned these ACA subsidy extensions. In the last 5 years, the states that have adopted the ACA enrollment have largely been Republican states. We're talking Texas, Florida, West Virginia, Tennessee. The pain is going to be felt among Republican constituents. So at this point, the Republicans really, I mean, it's win-win for them to relent here and come to the negotiating table. But Democrats would be fools, Chris. Democrats would be absolute fools to surrender what little leverage they have and just take Republicans at their word when they say, hey guys, we'll totally, definitely negotiate with you. All we ask is that you surrender all your leverage, open up the government, and then come sit down with us, the people who just cut $1 trillion from healthcare.
Look, I'm with you, except for a couple of things. One is shutdown should be illegal. You're putting the pain on everybody else in the interest of making things better for everybody else. I think it's a mixed message. I don't think it plays for you guys as well as you think. The second thing is this. Fetterman says he trusts Thune to have negotiations. We'll see if he's right or wrong.
Let me ask you a question on that. Let me ask you a question on that point.
Hold on. Let me give you my answer, and then you ask your question, and you get the last word. Cool. Here's the deal. We need the subsidies. Everybody wants the subsidies. You know they want the subsidies, Mr. and Mrs. Republican. I give you the reimbursements issue. You decide, Republicans, what states get reimbursed for giving emergency care to undocumented immigrants. Here, I give it to you. You decide the reimbursement rate, and you own it. I'm giving you that issue. It is not about giving illegals, that ugly word, a free health care. Here, you can have it. I want the subsidies. Present that to the American people. You win all day long. You won't do it. I don't know why.
This back and forth between Tyler Cohen and Chris Cuomo cuts straight into one of the biggest political contradictions we keep seeing. Because Republicans insist they care about fiscal responsibility and working-class Americans yet constantly block or weaken the very programs that actually help those same voters. And Brian is completely right to point out that many of the states benefiting the most from Affordable Care Act subsidies and Medicaid expansion are Republican-led, places like Texas, Florida, West Virginia, and Tennessee, where hospital closures have surged and medical debt is suffocating families simply because state leaders refuse to expand basic health coverage. And the numbers don't lie, since uninsured rates dropped sharply nationwide after ACA subsidies were introduced, and the Kaiser Family Foundation shows that more than 78% of Americans, including a majority of Republicans, support keeping those subsidies, which isn't political spin but a nationwide agreement. Yet GOP lawmakers still treat health care as a bargaining tool instead of a basic necessity. And while Chris argues that shutdowns should be illegal, he misses the deeper reality that Democrats aren't holding the government hostage for personal gain, but are using the only leverage they have to protect health care access for millions. something that wouldn't even be needed if Republicans were negotiating in good faith. And the real mixed message isn't coming from Democrats, but from a Republican Party that claims to defend American families while trying to cut the very safety nets those families depend on, making this far more than a budget fight because it's a battle over moral priorities. And right now, only one side is actually standing up for the people being hit the hardest by this shutdown.
I'll give you a last word. Go ahead.
Yeah. So on this idea that the Republicans can come forward and ask for the Democrats to relent, just open up the government and then we'll sit down with you. That's apparently what John Fetterman is saying that he takes John Thune at his word for. It goes the other way. Why not just sit down with the Democrats today, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, hammer out a deal to extend these ACA subsidies? Hammer out a deal to extend these ACA subsidies, and then you open up the government. Look, the Democrats are all on board. All they're asking for with what little leverage they have is to extend the ACA subsidies. They're not asking for the sun and the moon here. They're not asking, to extend, like, this isn't Green New Deal. There's no poison pills. It is something that, again, has the vast majority of support across the country among both Democrats and Republicans.
It does. But not this way. Not this way. Nobody said shut down the government to do it. And you got hooked up on that illegals health care, horrible poison pill.
There is no. You and I both know that there is not a dime of federal funding that goes toward undocumented health care.
So give it to them.
Sure. I mean, that's not even up for debate. And the reality is they know it's not up for debate. They know that they're acting in bad faith. But I'm saying instead of surrendering the leverage that we have, ask these Republicans to come to the negotiating table right now. If they're acting in good faith when they say that they of course want to make a deal on ACA subsidies, do it right now. There's time today.
They will not reward the shutdown. They won't reward the shutdown because then the minority always does it. They have to pass a law that shutdowns are illegal, and then you can get into this. But I appreciate your policy points. I think you guys are fighting the right fight.
The Republicans should do that with the capital they have. But until then, this is it.
I got to jump. I love having the discussion. Let's have more of them, even though, man, you put me to shame. Not the arguments, the facial hair. It's killing me. I can't even look at you. You're too handsome. You're too young. Brian Tyler Cohen, thank you very much for debating it.
This section really exposes one of the biggest political games Republicans keep running, demanding that Democrats negotiate in good faith while refusing to actually come to the table. And Brian Tyler Cohen goes straight to the heart of the problem because if Republicans genuinely cared about ending the shutdown and helping Americans, they would be negotiating right now instead of waiting for Democrats to fold. And historically, this pattern isn't new since we saw it during the 2013 shutdown over Obamacare, and again in the 2018 standoff over immigration, where Republicans stalled, pointed fingers at Democrats, and then backed off only after the political and economic damage hit their own supporters. And the whole narrative Chris Cuomo echoes about undocumented people getting free health care isn't just misleading but factually wrong because federal law through the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act requires hospitals to treat anyone in an emergency regardless of citizenship, which is not the same as providing free health care, and the reality is undocumented immigrants contribute billions in taxes every year, around $12 billion according to the IRS. Yet they remain ineligible for most federal programs, including ACA subsidies, so when Republicans bring this talking point out, it's nothing more than political theater. And the irony is that the people suffering most from this shutdown, rural communities, low-income families, and workers relying on SNAP or healthcare subsidies, mostly live in states that vote Republican. So when Brian says Democrats shouldn't give up their leverage, he's completely right because this isn't about partisanship but about standing firm for millions of Americans who will lose the most if the GOP keeps treating governing like a campaign trick.